half years of contemporary painting. And I mean, to be able to accomplish this, these incredibly strong, dynamic, complex paintings that make your heart pound at this point, and just he's getting better and better. And it's really an honor to have this show with you, Terry. Thank you so much for this beautiful exhibit. And also, where's Oh, here's Terry's wife, and she's the model for all of the. There used to be other models, but now she's the only model for all of the things. So thank you for being so supportive and a great partner to Terry, because if you don't have a great model, somebody to partner with you, the same magic doesn't happen. So anyway, I'll let you guys take it from here. And thanks again, Robert, for doing this. And thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Hi, Terry.
Hi, Bob.
Well, for me, this is really a distinct honor and a pleasure to have the opportunity to talk with you today at what I think everyone can agree is an incredibly masterful exhibition of work. And I think congratulations are in order. And don't you think so? Doesn't it look great? Okay. Thank you. Terry, I've known you as a teacher, a mentor, and a friend, as Lisa said, for over 40 years. And you've been so important to me and to many other people as a supporter, a mentor, and a role model, and also an inspirational figure. And what amazes me is, having seen your development over the years, is your ability to grow as an artist and to continually push the boundaries of your work. And we're out here, there's the coronavirus happening, and all these people have shown up today, and I think it's brave to come out. And for me, your paintings are very brave, and I think that's one of the factors that I think is so amazing in them. But what I'd like you to do, if you can, is talk a little bit about how you've been able to develop your work and make these changes and grow as an artist over time, and maybe talk a little bit about this series of work.
Okay. Well, usually I have this big studio in Chiang Mai, and it is big. You can park 4 Greyhound buses in there easily. And after I finish a series of paintings, such as this, it's sort of like a punctuation point. And then I will start playing around with some ideas for a short period of time and proceed on some of those ideas. And this is a period where there'll be a little bit of a hit and miss, and then pretty soon I'll find something I'm interested in and proceed to develop that. And I don't know what it'll be, but it'll be somehow connected with the tail end work I did here. Mm-hmm. And then it grows. It grows out of the paint I paint, and the paint suggests certain things you can do and certain things you can't do, certain things you want to do. And so I follow the paint, what the paint wants. And that's how I start. And then it can go in different directions, and then it sort of ends up
here. Like this.
Yeah.
Is there something in this group of work or this body of work that ties it together for you? What would that?
Well, I think the attention I pay to the compositions, I think it's important in a painting to have a composition, and I think working with the loose paint, and it suggests a lot of things, and helps develop a composition, and when the painting isn't working, I will simply, scrape part of it off, or put a lot of color in one area or something, do something to get it started again in another direction.
These paintings have almost a geological feel to them. These thick slabs of paint that you're laying down, and they have a physicality to them where the surface of the paintings come forward, drop back, and then that plays against the subject. And in some of them, the figures are in the foreground and something will be in the background. And sometimes the figure's in the background and you have something very dominant in the foreground, like the painting in the back, one of the smaller ones on the left of those paintbrushes, is very dynamic. So are you seeing everything sort of as equal weight, the figure, the objects?
Well, everything starts out as being equal, more or less. I mean, or I might be more attracted to a can full of thinner or something like that because it has red, nice red to use, and I'll start to use that, and then the red will demand another color, maybe a green someplace, a green bottle, and then I just keep developing. I look at everything in the studio, and I look at just different parts of the studio, and some areas suggest certain colors. Maybe it's subliminally they suggest it, but I develop it just by intuition.
So, well, I'd like to go back a little bit. I remember when you came down to UC Santa Cruz when I first met you, when I was a student, 1978, to teach the Outdoor Painters Project. And at the time, I remember you would give, I was your TA or monitor for several years, and you'd, first thing you would do is show students slides of the Society of Six, which is very interesting because first modern painters in California. And I know you came to learn about the Society of Six yourself from being a curator at the Oakland Museum. Can you talk a little bit about how you knew about the group?
Well, in 1969, I became an associate curator at the Oakland Museum, and I learned about the Society of Six because they were on the walls. And then pretty soon, George Newbert, the new curator, wanted to have a Society of Six show, and he said I would curate it. And then I just started reading. We had a lot of information at the Oakland Museum and the library, and I started reading whatever information I could get out of old newspapers and how the group worked, and then probably even better than that was my connection with Louis Segrist, for all intents and purposes, the only one that was alive then, and he was a wonderful encyclopedia of the Society of Six, and it was a group where there weren't really any rules, but you couldn't do bad painting, what they defined as bad painting, and they'd go out and they would find a spot they agreed to, and they'd flop down the ground and paint and do small paintings, and then at the end of the day they'd sort of sit around and maybe look at it and criticize each other's work, and then go back to Selden Giles' little cabin in the Oakland Hills, and he would cook a meal for them. And then stories like that were fascinating, and there was a lot of drinking went on, and not while they were painting, but afterwards, and then they'd have play poker, and some of the games would get a little wild, and Red Von Eichmann got mad at the group and upset the whole table, the chips and the money, and then everybody chased him down the hill, and he ran away. And so they were pretty wild and woolly. But most of all, just about every one of them was a good painter. Selden Gile was the best, but they had Auguste Gay, French American, and he was a wonderful painter, and all of them are good. But Gile was just, you know, few steps ahead of them. And
Can I read something that you wrote about the Society of Six that was an essay for the book Plein Air Painters of California, the North. You said this about Selden Gile. Even though Selden Gile approached his subject with a rare spontaneity, his work can be readily identified not because he employed tired formulas, but rather because he approached his theme with an incisive directness that saw each new painting as being unique.
yeah.
Is that something that became something of a principle for you as a painter?
Yeah, I like that a lot because there were no formulas, and I mean some things he learned and he would use again, but no formulas. Each painting was pretty unique, and I think that's the way to paint. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you, when you saw work by the Six on the walls of the museum at the Oakland Museum when you were there, did you respond to them initially? Was that something you looked at and like,
No,
I
thought they were pretty good initially, but there was an awful lot of good work around that was going up, and that was getting my attention also. I respond to them actually more now than ever. The more I know about painting, the more I appreciate what they did.
What other painters were you responding to at that time?
Well, I would say like, you know, Bischoff, Diebenkorn, Park, some of the, you know, figure painters, Van Gogh, sort of a wide net of painters I liked. Yeah.
Would you, one of the things, my personal feeling about your work is that in some ways you've extended the ideas and approaches of the Bay Area figurative school in your work. You've extended it. I kind of think of Bonnard, for example, as being someone who extended ideas that the Impressionists developed. He comes a generation later, but he's significant, and so I see that in this work of yours.
I like, to me, Bay Area figure painting, it isn't dead. I remember when I went to graduate school at CCA, the Bay Area figure painters were put down in the seminars, and that wasn't very, you know, long, not much of a distance between when they broke out and everybody praised them, and then already their old hat at CCAC, and I thought they were dead wrong. And then another time, a very good painter, a friend of mine, we went over to the city and saw a Jim Weeks show, and it was really a beautiful show. And this painter said, Well, there it is. He did it. No use doing it. Trying it again. He's done it all.
Yeah.
And he said that, and I didn't agree with him at all, because that wasn't the point of painting, you know.
Yeah.
And you have to appreciate what he did, but it'll come out your own way differently.
So the beyond Bay Area figurative painters, when I look at this work, it seems to have a connection, maybe more so with the buildup of the paint and the mark making of some of the English school painters like Lucian Freud and Frank Orbach.
Yeah.
And
well, I love Orbach's work, but well, I'll tell a little story. I got a hold of this book on Orbach. God, it's probably in the early '80s or something. That it was published by the British government, and it was lent to me by Patrick Hummel. And I took it to the breakfast group, and I showed it to Elmer, and he said, "Can I borrow it for the weekend?" And I said, "Sure," and let him borrow it. And then next Friday, when there was a breakfast, he gave it back. And I said, "What did you think of Orbach?" He says, "Not much." You know, and
Elmer.
but I didn't feel that way. I felt Orbach was really good, but he sort of mashed a lot of the color and mussed it up, and some of it didn't work very well. But
well, you mentioned Elmer Bischoff, and you did a lot of landscape painting. When I first knew you, you mainly were working from the landscape, and you let students like myself come out and paint with you. That was one of your ways of mentoring me and others, some of whom are in the audience. You know who you are. And I remember I took some of these paintings in to show Elmer Bischoff, because I was in graduate school at Berkeley studying in a class with him, and I said, "I've been going out with Terry St. John, and these are the paintings we did outside." And he goes, "You did these outside? You actually went outside?" And I said, "Do you ever go out?" He said, "Well, I tried it once or twice. It didn't work." And he said, "Diebenkorn told me that going outside to paint was like getting in the ring with Muhammad Ali."
yeah, Elmer told me the same thing.
Did you ever feel beat up when you were going out painting outside?
Of course, sometimes, yeah.
One of the things that, I mean, this is fun to describe, and I think the landscape painting kind of evolved, but I wish people could have experienced going out with Terry and seeing what he would do, because he'd come out with a pickup truck covered in paint, and he'd pull out, 4 by 5 foot canvases and an easel, which he would tie down with ropes. I remember one time we were out, and it was a warm day, and I think someone had some wet laundry, and they pinned it onto the rope of your holding down your easel to dry out, but you had this a TV table tray. You liked using those, right?
Yeah.
You started, so you did a lot of landscape painting. How did you evolve into figurative painting from there?
Well, figurative painting was where I was at first. Yeah.
So then you started putting figures into the landscapes at some point.
Yeah, but I didn't like it too much the figures I was doing then. But my first love was figure painting, like and to do it my own way. And I loved landscape painting, and I'd do landscape painting. Later, I could do it pretty much like figure painting. It was a lot of bright colors and a lot of getting rid of stuff that wasn't very interesting, putting something else in its place, and playing with it a lot.
So in a way, I mean, everyone's heard this term, the figure in the landscape.
Yeah.
But for these paintings, you might say that it's the landscape in the figure.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah.
So
Well, I'll show you. In the studio, a lot of times you look in the studio and it's fairly drab, a lot of grays and all, but there are colors there. And if you look at it and you say, well, I look at it and I say, well, this is going to be my painting today, and I'm going to find what colors are there, and then start making the painting. And then with a model, putting a model in it and treating her not special, just part of the thing, and the painting starts developing.
yeah. So when you're approaching, and you have this large studio, you're approaching that very much like you would. When we'd go out to paint, it was amazing to watch you paint because you were like a moving man. You would take things out, you'd move them around, you'd repaint areas.
Yeah, all that.
Wet into wet.
Yeah.
And so that approach carried through as you started to do the figure.
Yeah, because by moving things around and changing the colors, you it suggests new ideas and it puts more good color into the painting and more spirit.
So one of I think, testament to how you're viewed in the Bay Area now is that a painting was purchased by the DeYoung Museum, and it's a figurative painting, Woman Reflecting is the title, and I went to see it, and it's a beautiful painting, and it's hanging with the other Bay Area figurative painters, Bischoff and Diebenkorn, and you're a very modest person, but you told me sort of a funny story about going to see that painting for the first time. I was just wondering, you might want to relate that because I think it's interesting.
Well, this particular painting, I painted it. I was getting ready to go to Europe, and I was under a lot of pressure to finish the painting to get it to the Hackett Freeman Gallery, and I worked really hard at it, and I used sign painter's paint and all sorts of things, and I just painted like mad, and the painting looked pretty good to me, and then later I sent it to the gallery, and later I saw it in reproduction at the time, and the reproduction as it was then, it exaggerated. If you had a blue, it was real blue. If you had a red, no subtle, it was real red. And it made the painting look really cheap and glossy. And so when I was honored to have this painting at the DeYoung Museum, I was really afraid I'd be humiliated when it was hung, and I was afraid to be there.
Yeah.
And
so you were afraid to go to the museum to look at it.
For a long time before that, I was hoping I'd get that painting back, and I'd slash it,
Oh, just
destroy it.
take a razor blade.
And what happened was I saw it, and it wasn't like the reproduction. It was different. It wasn't too red. It wasn't too this. It wasn't too that. It was really about right.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it, and I almost cried. I was so happy.
That's the line you said to me was, "I thought it was going to be the worst day of my life."
Yeah, very humiliating. I mean, a curator there to meet me and greet me, and.
Terry, I remember when we went to the museum to go see it the first time, and you had this look of awe on your face, but I didn't know why.
It's the rest of the story right there. So, well, I'm glad it turned out well for you, and it's nice to have the painting there and to have you represented, because I really do think that you're an important figure in Bay Area contemporary Bay Area art and in, and your links that we discussed back to the Society of Six through, the Bay Area Figurative School and to you. And I think the museum is well represented to have your painting there, and it'd be nice if they had more.
Thank you.
So, good. I don't know, we kind of went over a little bit of this, but I'll just kind of throw these questions out. I actually asked you, I said, are there any questions you want me to ask you? And you said, how much paint do you use and why? So you're going to ask yourself your own question there.
Oh, well, I use as much as I feel is needed, which, and the longer I paint on a painting, the thicker the paint layers get. And I have to use enough to make an image, and sometimes if you have too rough of a surface underneath, it gets harder to do and you have to use more paint.
Mm-hmm. So the rough surface gets covered over by more.
More, yeah.
And it seems like you really like getting the surface wet. Will you get the entire surface wet each time, or are you?
Yeah, you get it wet. And if you paint a painting with thick paint and you paint every day on it, a certain amount of it stays wet all the time.
Mm-hmm. How much scraping are you doing?
Well, it depends. If there's a whole area I just determine is not working, I get a big palette knife I have and just scrape, throw the paint off.
Yeah. And kind of get the surface so that you can rework it. And
yeah, so the surface so I can rework it and just try to get something going in that area that wasn't working before.
And how often are you starting on a new surface, a blank canvas?
Yeah, I hate it. I hate it. It's just, to me, it's just, I wish I had somebody I could just hand it to and say, start this painting.
What is the difficulty for you in the beginning?
See, very rarely do you ever get a good painting by a start. Very rarely. So I know that I'm not going to get a good painting. It's going to be painted over, which makes it sort of, it doesn't matter what you put there, you're going to be painting over it again. And so after a couple of coats or starts of the painting, then it starts to develop and gets over the newness. And
yeah. So you need that worked surface.
Yeah, I need that. In fact, I like painting over paintings that I stopped and weren't finished. Sometimes I just started a painting right on it,
So just a whole new painting.
Yeah, a whole new painting.
If it's not working for you, you're just going to start again.
Yeah.
On an older surface.
Yeah, it makes a beautiful surface. Makes some of the colors you can use underneath sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I remember, going out with you to paint, and sometimes it'd just be amazing because you just rework something, like you would use some composition from some other place, and then you'd adapt what you were looking at into the new motif into the old painting.
Yeah.
And is that something you're doing with these as well?
And what?
Like you adapt what you have on there, but then you can kind of use the composition for something new.
Yeah.
So, is there anything that surprises you while you're painting?
Oh, I'm surprised every time I paint.
Yeah.
That's one of the when I paint and the painting's getting really interesting, I get very nervous and excited and everything. And I'm surprised, and that's my wife on. I discovered she's very intelligent, and I trained her to be a spotter. A spotter is somebody that I always wanted that will tell you when to stop, because I painted over a lot of good paintings before. And I have photographs to prove it, because it's just it's nice to look at them on your iPad, but I'd rather have the canvas.
Yeah.
You know? And she said, that looks pretty good. Well, now when she says that, I really take it seriously.
Uh-huh.
And it might not be perfect, but it's getting a lot better. And she's very good at that. And it saved me a whole lot of work. Maybe that's why this is a good show.
Thank you, An. So, you know, you were born in Stockton, but you're really raised, you're of the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And I always
I
thought...
was born in Sacramento.
Sacramento,
yeah.
Sorry. I know you spent some time in Stockton,
Yeah.
but you're regarded really as a Bay Area painter, and one of the things I always thought was that you really understood and you knew the location, kind of like Cézanne knew Aix-en-Provence.
Yeah.
He grew up there, and so you slowly started to explore other places to live. You went to Thailand. You liked it, and you were living there. You know, started out with, I thought it was a lark. You know, you went for a couple months, then you went for 6 months, then you moved there permanently.
Yeah.
And so I kept expecting you to move back, but you haven't done it. But I'm wondering, how is it for you as a painter living in Thailand? Do people recognize you as a painter? Do they know who you are? Or
No,
is
they
this
don't even care about it.
Yeah?
The average Thai, yeah, it's just, I'm doing painting, it doesn't matter to them.
Uh-huh. And how does it feel to be there as a painter? You feel obviously like it's a very productive place for you.
I don't really need their feedback. They just sort of leave me alone. That's good enough.
Uh-huh. Good. And then when the time comes, you hear from Lisa.
I get what?
You hear from Lisa.
Yeah.
And she's...
Yeah. Yeah,
saying
the worst thing about Thailand is the health coverage, and you know that is a problem because you can't get American health coverage.
So you have to,
Yeah.
you're on your own.
Yeah, you're on your own.
Okay. Well, you know, I kind of want to just kind of finish up with a quote by former San Francisco Chronicle critic Kenneth Baker, who wrote something about you. And I know when we used to go out and paint, we would be a little bit like, well, you know, Kenneth Baker likes minimalism. He doesn't really, cover painting. But so I think it's a real credit to you that he's written before he retired, several very nice reviews of your work. And in one that was from the show here in 2014, I thought this was so apropos that I thought I'd read it. He said, paint matter gives flesh with equal force to figures and voids, shadow and mass. Just enough self-doubt invades St. John's paintings to bolster their mute assertion that knowledge of others and of ourselves, never mind how spiritual we deem it, must pass through matter. And I think that's a very beautiful statement and captures in a poetic way this work. And thank you.
Thank you.
I think we could take some questions from the audience. How has living in Thailand influenced your work?
I think it's sort of the laid-back lifestyle I like a lot there, and it influenced my work in that I found a wife there that's influenced my work, and you'd have to be in Thailand, but Thailand, in spite of all the uproar over various things there, like the authoritarian government. It really is a nice place. And it just sort of, you look forward to painting, and then you finish the day and you look forward to maybe watching a good movie at home or playing with the cats or something.
What's your relationship? Do you feel an affinity to Bonnard, and do you feel any
Oh, yes, certainly. I
relationship?
feel to the history of Western painting, all the way from Tintoretto to me, it's all, there's a stream that's connected. And I mean, there's so many great artists in Western art, and with Eastern art too, Japanese art. And, I feel very strongly connected to Bay Area figure painting because I'm closer in time to it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
And I feel that it all hasn't been painted out yet.
Mm-hmm. This is regarding the heat in Chiang Mai and the weather, and she was wondering if you go out to paint.
Yeah, the heat is a problem on painting. I haven't done a lot of landscape painting in Chiang Mai because of different factors. Because usually you dress in old clothes and you're driving an old jalopy and you look like a bum. and the Thais are very officials, take very dim view of appearance. And I've been very hesitant to push that. But this next trip, I'm going to do more of it. And a friend of mine, an Australian artist, owns some property where it's good landscape painting, and I'll see if he'll let me paint on his property sometime, and be easier to do. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, if they see you painting, they wonder, what are you doing with the painting? And they'll think you're trying to sell it, and then where's your business license and stuff like that. And so I've just been afraid to test the waters there, but yeah. I think I'll do it, find out one way or another what would happen.
Good question. One of the objects in a number of the paintings is the wine bottle.
Yeah.
And I think the question is, how are you using that in the paintings? What purpose does it play for you in the composition?
It's a symbol.
Uh-huh.
Well, first of all, it's, if you just have a wine bottle around, it's sort of a beautiful object and in itself, so it doesn't have to have any purpose other than beauty. But on the other hand, it's a symbol. It holds fluids. And I used to drink a lot, and so maybe that's why I always have a wine bottle or something. It sublimated my desire to drink or something.
Can I just say one thing that I want to share with everybody? I was talking to Terry a couple of days ago. We were sitting looking at the paintings and just talking about the process. And Terry, you've been painting for more than 65 years. I don't know, 67, 68 years. Anyway, he's been painting for a long time. And we were talking about the paintings and how brilliant they are, or I was saying how brilliant they are and how exciting they are, and he goes, they're actually terrifying. It's so terrifying to go in every day and paint, and I'm like, wow, how exciting that after 67 years, it's still terrifying. So, and they're so, they're just, they're masterpieces, so we're glad that you're brave enough to go in and be terrified and still do it. So.
Thank you.
Good job, Terry. Thank you.